Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, arson, deadly protests, and an internet blackout. India's Manipur state is in turmoil. Here to tell us more about that, Malika Bilal, our digital producer.
And there's so much there, Femi. Offline in Manipur, at least 8 people are dead, and several lawmakers' houses are gutted by fire. That violence broke out last week over new state laws that tribal districts say will weaken their power, culture, and their land rights. Now, online, one person describes it to the stream like this: born and brought up in Manipur, with the bills introduced, I will become a foreigner in my own land. Of course, we want you to join in on this conversation as well, so you can tweet us with hashtag AJStream, and you too can be in the stream.
Hi, I'm Dr. Shravan Dasoju, member of Politburo and official spokesperson of Telangana Rashtra Samiti. I am in stream right now.
Malika has given you a little taste of the unrest, but to really understand the crisis, we need to look at where Manipur is and who lives there. So let me take you into the northeastern part of India. Manipur until 1949 was its own kingdom, neighbours of Bangladesh and also Myanmar. I want to take you into the geography, though, of this state and look very closely at what we have here. We have a valley surrounded by hills. In the valley live the Meitei people. Up in the hills live the tribal people. So down in the valley, the Meitei, well, they're the majority of the population. They have a very strong say in state government, but they only live on 10% of Manipur's land. Why is that? Well, that's because the hills are protected tribal lands, and up in the hills live tribes like the Naga, the Kuki, and the Zomi. These tribes are worried about their culture, and they don't want the Meitei to have tribal and land rights. But the Meitei are also worried. Meitei down here in the valley are worried that migrants from around the area will come in to the valley and actually take over. They call the migrants outsiders. And the Meitei say that they need more space and they want the government to protect their culture as well. So that gives you just a little hint of what the story is that we're going to be talking about today. Malika?
So much more to talk about. So to help us explain what unites and divides Manipur, in New Delhi, Golan Nolak is an independent researcher. In Kolkata, Gorgo Chatterjee is a columnist. And Beena Lakshmi Nairam is the founder of the Manipur Women Gun Survivors Network. Welcome to the stream, everyone. I want to start with you, Beena. There's a tweet here that really gives us a taste of what's going on. This is from Mar Tweets, who writes in, situation is still tense. Phone lines are open, but SMSs, text messages, messaging services like WhatsApp are still blocked, and most people are staying indoors. And Beena, I know you were there just a few days ago. What did you see?
Right now, the situation, as one of the earlier tweeters said, it's one of the darkest moments in Manipur history. One of the darkest movements in the history of Churachandpur, also called Lamka by many of the people who live there, where more than 9 lives have been cut short and more than 60 are recovering or in hospitals around. So it's one of the darkest periods in Manipur history. We are extremely, extremely upset the high-handedness of the Manipur police in handling the situation in spite of the state being under martial law and the army for more than 60 years. Now the question is, what is Manipur? Manipur is home to 2.2 million people. It was an independent nation state before it merged with the Union of India in 1949, with many contesting ethnic groups who says that there are trans-border tribe, and we are trying to, it's still like India is a state in nation making, so too Manipur is a state which is still in the process of making. What happened in 1950s, before India merged, with Manipur merged with Manipur merged with India, what happened was there was a regulation of the entry of migrants into the state. But in 1950, this was taken over. The application submitted by many civil society are saying
I just want to make sure that we all...
The migrant population...
We want to stay up with you. We want to stay up to date with what's happening today. So if I came to Manipur today, what would I find? Are people burning houses? Are people fighting? Are they protesting? What's going on?
Manipur has been in a state of deadlock for the last 2 months. There was curfew before and lots of buns and strikes all our lives. This is one of the most militarized zones. We have 100,000 Indian armed forces. We have one of the highest concentration of armed police personnel in the entire country. We have got more than 62 armed insurgent groups, and more than 20,000 people have died in this conflict, which has raged in this state. So we are living, Manipur is an abnormal state. If you come today, you'll find markets and shops shut. The children just started going to school day before yesterday after 2 months of deadlock. So we are living in Manipur is an abnormal condition for both the valley and the hill people. And we appeal to the world community to put focus, to the Indian government to full focus, because right now the divisions have gone so deep. As Nolak said, we all want to live a life of community spirit, but there is a breaking of those ethnic spirit. It's one of the, as I said, the darkest times, and we must make this happen.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I think this is exactly the point that we should take the discussion forward with, where Bina says that that the divide, the rift has been so stark and so deep. And this divide is not just, it didn't just come yesterday. The introduction of the three contentious bills and the subsequent violence.
I'm going to keep stopping you, guests, because we're catching up with this story. This story isn't even well covered in India, let alone around the rest of the world. So let's take this very slowly, Golan. Who is fighting who? Part one.
I think that's not the way to put the question.
All right, educate us.
Yeah, I think let's put the question like this. Let's frame it this way.
Yes, go ahead.
It's who is demanding what and at what cost. I think we should recognize the long history of struggles of the Manipur tribals within the idea of Manipur.
So Golan, I'm actually going to insist that you answer this question, because we're going to walk through this very gently. The demands. Who is demanding what?
Okay, the Meitei population, which is the dominant community which lives in the 10% valley of Manipur, demands the introduction of bills which will protect their land.
Yes.
Now, they fought for 2 months. They introduced 3 bills, and which are passed without any discussion, without any debate in the assembly. And these 3 bills have been passed. Now, these 3 bills have contained provisions which undermine and infringe upon the already existing constitutional rights of the tribals in Manipur. So what we're seeing here is 60% of the population, which lives in 10% of the land, making a law without any consultation whatsoever in terms of civil society organizations or even within the assembly, passing 3 bills which would apply in all the districts of Manipur, including the hills and in the valleys. This is exactly where the hills have risen up in protests, and that has resulted in violence, where there is and these incidents, the violence and the passing of the bills, I think, to my mind, are a part of a larger scheme of things. We must understand that these are not isolated situations.
So Golan, a lot of the international community are listening to this, and it's also been really interesting. A lot of people from Manipur have been talking to Malika and our digital team as well. So let me leave a little space so they can get into the conversation. Malika.
I love that you said that. We are hearing from a lot of people in Manipur, but I actually am going to read this tweet from someone outside of Manipur.
Of course you are.
He's in India, though, because it gives it a little perspective on people not understanding, but there is a historical context for that. So this is Ravindra, who says the shutting down the internet was something that had to happen. He says Manipur is a critical border state, and there were reasons why authorities then had to block these messaging services and so forth that we talked about at the beginning of the show. So Gorgo, as someone, I know you want to, but I want to bring Gorgo in here because as someone who's outside of Manipur, talking about this critical border state, what is it that is so critical?
And therein, in that sentence, lies the problems of how mainland Indians look at a state. Manipur is not a border state as far as Manipur is concerned. Manipur is a state where people of Manipur live. So when mainland India has this kind of a security outlook to a place, to a region, and like Manipur, it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem when all of Manipur is under virtual I would say martial rule for the last 50, 60 years. It's a problem when in Manipur, people can be killed on the street by the police on broad daylight, encounter killings, and nothing happens out of it. And in this context, we have to look at Manipur as a society where state violence has been so high that violence has been normalized and internalized, and that causes a huge problem and trauma among the people. I mean, which is why, and think about the very fragile ethnic status of Manipur. We are talking about the Meiteis of the valley, we are talking about the hill tribes, and but both of their numbers really pale to inconsequence when we talk about mainland India in general. Right now in the Meitei Valley, there are almost as many outsiders outside of Manipur people than the Meiteis, for example, right? And that is a problem. It's a problem because this is the only ethnic homeland the Meiteis have. This is also true for the hill tribes of Manipur. So in any case, the people of Manipur, all sides, and by all sides I mean the valley and the hill people, have to sit together. And in this case, the principle of minority rights has to be kept into mind, in the sense that the hill people, the Meiteis, have to be magnanimous and hear what are the specific problems with the past bills that the hill people have, and solve it between themselves. There cannot be any third party in this crisis, because as far
Right.
as mainland India is concerned, it is either a border state, or they will respond by sentence like, why can't an Indian go anywhere, based on the ILP demands. And of course, there are special parts of India which got integrated into India under special circumstances.
All right, so guess,
That most
guess
Indians are ignorant
take a
is
pause
not
for
the
a moment,
problem of
guess,
Manipur.
because a couple of things, references that you brought up, and I think they are really important. And I want to bring in on the phone BULLU RAJ. He's the founder of the Human Rights Alert. So you might hear the acronym ILP. It's basically a travel permit to go into certain restricted areas in India. That is part of the conversation. BULLU RAJ, how important is the idea that there should be a travel permit or a visa to get into Manipur? Where does that come into this conversation?
See, when Manipur was annexed into India in 1949, there were just 3,000 people from India in Manipur. Today, about 70 years in the process, the number have swelled 300 times, and now it is estimated that there are about 100,000 outside Indians settling in Manipur today.
So people in Manipur, they feel, are you saying, I should say the BULLU RAJ, he's a human rights activist, do you feel that the people in Manipur feel that they're totally swamped, they're overwhelmed?
Yes. And now that there is going to be the Trans-Asian Highway and the Trans-Asian Railway passing through Manipur, unless and until there are some level of protection of this influx from outside, the population of Manipur will be overswarmed very soon. Manipur constitute about 0.5% of the entire population of the rest of India. So what we are talking here is to protect a distinct culture and a distinct identity of a microscopic minority who are very soon going to be overswammed. And therefore, some level of protection is required to ensure that these communities survive. And that was what was sought to be achieved through this new law.
Right.
But unfortunately, it had triggered off a certain level of fear.
Let BULLU RAJ just finish his sentence, then we can hear you. Yes, go ahead, Golan.
Yeah, I think the microscopic minority that BULLU referred to is in context, is in reference to the rest of India. But we must understand the internal dynamics within Manipur itself. And in this, I think the microscopic minority that he mentioned are the dominant majority in the state of Manipur. And I think the issue right now is not so much the bills or the violence that followed the three bills, but I think whatever has happened in last few days, in the last 6-7 days, is a reflection of a systematic injustice and discrimination being meted out on the tribals of Manipur. And I think that if you look at the history of Manipur, especially of the hills, I think the Nagas are demanding a greater Nagalim, the Kukis want a different state, the Zomis are asking for something else. So one common thing, the demands are all different. The hill tribes demand different things. But one thing that binds all their demands is that they want separation from the valley. They want to be separated from the Meitei-dominated state of Manipur. And I think this idea of separation, though, is not the very best idea. I like I said in the beginning, I think we must find ways to live together. We must find ways to live in harmony with one another. But at the same time, I think the point has come that in Manipur, we cannot live together anymore. the divide is so much emotionally, culturally, politically, administratively. There's divisions everywhere, cutting right across our very existence.
I would like to come
Yeah?
in now. Yeah. So I think Golan is right in a way. There has been more than 68 years of neglect of the hills of Manipur. That's there. The divide in Manipur is not just hills and the valley, it's also religion. That majority of the ones in the valley are animists, Sanamahis, or they are Hindus. There are also Manipuri Muslim in the area, and whereas a lot of it in the hills are also Christian majority. So there are all these divides, and then the British laws also divided each other, and now many of the schemes of the Indian government has also divided us. So it's time for the majority people in Manipur, particularly the Meiteis, to apologize for the wrongs done. Our leaders have failed the hills of Manipur. This is the cry that we are feeling at this stage, and we, the dominant Meiteis, cannot ignore this and ensure that our brothers and sisters in the hills get the acceptance, the rights, the justice, and the respect they deserve. At the same time, what's happening is...
Lakshmi, I see you reading notes, and this is, you're already speaking passionate from the heart, so don't look at your notes, because I really want to have this a conversation that's not note-taking and real conversation. So hold tight for a moment. Let me just bring in Malika. Malika, go ahead.
Well, some of that passion that you have, Bina, really is echoed here from a community member, so I want you all to have a listen to this video comment and let me know what you think.
The Meitei community, as a majority, is responsible for ensuring that the rights of the minorities are not trampled upon. And India, as a democratic nation, needs to speak out against any act of racism which would put the minorities under threat.
So he says minorities' rights need to be looked out for. But Bablu, on the other hand, though, we have this tweet that referenced something you mentioned earlier about people in the valley feeling overwhelmed. This is one person who writes in that the Meitei want to restrict the movement of outsiders as there is unabated influx in the valley. So how do you go about, Bablu, how do you go about reconciling those two things? One, people in the hills saying that they want their rights and they don't want to be discriminated against. And two, people in the valley saying, we're running out of space, we're running out of jobs, opportunity. How do you reconcile that?
Well, I think both have a case which needs to be heard. These grievances have to be tackled and understood. However, we cannot argue in a way that my right, my assertion of a right cannot be to trample somebody else's right. And the basic challenge is to find the right balance for this. It is absolutely true that the living space for the valley people also is shrinking. And therefore, even though they are majority in terms of number, their grievances are also genuine, and therefore a certain level of control over their land and resources has to be put into consideration. There might be a majority if you consider Manipur context, but with the train and the highway that is coming and with the whole globalization process, if you look at the entire national context, they are also a microscopic minority. At the same time, the brothers in the hills are also suffering from all kinds of discrimination and underdevelopment.
So Bablu, can you explain a little bit of that discrimination?
And their identity needs to be protected. There should not be any question of majority imposing any kind of notions of development and identity in that area.
Hear me.
So
Bablu, can you explain a little bit of that discrimination that the tribal people... He can't hear me.
And empathizing with the sufferings and the survival, the struggles of the small communities, both in the valley as well as in the hills.
All right, so Bina Lakshmi, a little bit of that discrimination, you're hinting about it, but you're not being explicit. Tell us, what are we talking about here?
Yes, as I said, right now, a whole series of conversations are going within the country. Racism towards the people of Northeast in other parts of India, and now there's also the form of racism which exists in different parts of Northeast. India is a country which is just a 68-year-old sort of republic, and it's still a nation in the making. So
let's be very direct, because the time is running away from us. What is the discrimination that the people in the hills are facing?
So you see, the whole issue of this movement, the first is of development issue, that their rights, their resources in the universities, in the jobs, they are not being implemented. These are some of the concerns. Right now, may I make it very clear also that Manipur is home to more than 62 armed insurgent groups. Even the Meitei valleys have insurgent groups. The ones in the hills also have their own insurgent groups. These are a lot of insurgent groups in one area where civil society space for dialogue is shrinking. We, the women groups working across all ethnic communities, must find a solution. Right now, the situation is very, very tense. We're talking of a huge amount of arms proliferation influx in this area, where our lives are at ransom by men and government with guns. We are tired of this violence, and we want that we should be able to find our own space for peace and justice. Right now, it's a lot of movement which are directed by armed insurgent groups, both in the valley as in the hills. We are tired of this violence. We, the women groups, feel for peace. Yeah.
There cannot be any dialogue where the largest armed presence of the state becomes one of the dialogue makers. I think the dialogue has to be between the stakeholders inside Manipur. For example, India does not have a very good
just frozen, just as we were going to get to you. Golan, do you want to pick up? Because you said something very interesting earlier on. You said that you think it's too late for the people in the valley and the people in the hills to come to some kind of compromise. You felt that the solution was what?
Yes.
Separate, just to be separate.
Yes, I think that's the real issue now, and that's where we should be headed for. But I would just like to add on what you asked Bina, the kind of discrimination being meted out to the tribals by the dominant community. I think just by looking at the recent passing of the bills and the violence that followed, and the way the violence was contained, was responded by the police commandos. I think these are reflections of the kind of the discrimination being meted out on tribals. Number one, 2 months, the valley had protests to impose ILP, and yet not a single live bullet was used.
And that's that travel permit, that visa that I mentioned to you a little bit earlier. All right, this is really tricky.
In Churchandpur, 2 nights they're protesting in Churchandpur,
right.
But 8 people have died. They used live bullets. They did not use rubber bullets. They did not use water cannons. So all I'm trying to say is,
more than 20,000 people have died. More than 20,000
I'm looking at a systematic injustice being done on the tribals.
So Golan and Bina, just take a pause for a moment, both of you, because I can't hear both of you. I can't understand both of you. Take a pause for a moment, Bina, and also Golan. I think this is a really good point for me to actually say that as a team, we reached out to the government of India. We also reached out to the authorities in Manipur. We didn't get any response, but we felt it was important to actually say that as we were having this conversation. Let me head back to Malika. Malika, what do you have?
This is from Min Goit, who says the hope lies with the central federal government and not discriminating against the Manipur government, because only the central government can process and solve this severe crisis. Or on the other hand, you have a little bit more of an extreme view from John, who says the best way to come over these differences is to go our separate ways.
Now, I'm not going to fib to you. This is a complicated conversation. If there are questions that you would like to ask our guests, then you can do so. We're going to take you to the post show, stream.aljazeera.com, and the hashtag to use is #AJStream. Golan, just give us a finishing thought for this part of the main show. What is it?
Yeah, I think if you look at the kind of responses that's coming from the valley and from the government about the recent violence, I think it's all about misreading, misinterpretation of the tribals, as though the tribals cannot think for themselves. There's a certain prejudice, there's certain infantilizing of the tribals in Manipur by the dominant community, that we cannot think for ourselves, that we cannot decide for ourselves, that we don't know what's good for our future. So the 60% community in the valley says
the tribals
that
have been chief ministers of Manipur.
All right, so you're listening to Golan Nolak. Bina, just hold tight for a moment. Bina, give me a moment.
20 tribal ministers.
Bina, give me a moment. You can hear all the guests. We've got Gaga, we've got Bablu, we've got Golan and Bina as well. Just give me a moment, guests. We're taking this passion to the post show. Hope you can join us there too. Stream.aljazeera.com. We're talking about the North Indian state of Manipur. Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining us. We're at the Post Show. I'm Femi OK with Malika Bilal. We're discussing the unrest in Manipur, India. Malika said, I have so many comments and just sorting through them is a mission. How are you doing?
It is, because they're on all different topics, because this is a very multi-pronged conversation. So I'm going to share one of them with you. This is from Manash on Twitter, who says, while the views of people from the valley may differ from those in the hills on land reforms, the common concern is the illegal influx. So Gullan, I'm going to give this one to you because he talks about what unites people, and you talked about a little bit earlier the one common theme that people could unite upon, and it wasn't this issue. So I'm wondering what you think about that, addressing what this person calls quote unquote illegal influx of people.
Yeah, I would just like to give one line here. It is, yes, we must we must check illegal influx. However, in checking that, let us not impinge on the rights of our own brothers and sisters who are our neighbors, who have been living together with for many years. So in trying to contain this influx, let us remember not to infringe upon the constitutional rights of certain communities. Thank you.
So if there is illegal influx, we have to remember it happens from mainstream India. Now, India does not recognize the special relationship of indigenous people to their lands at all. For example, all over India, you have tribal lands being taken over by this excuse or that by Indian companies. So, for example, today it's the Meiteis who are facing the heat of influx from the rest of India, and hence becoming sort of minorities and marginal in their own land. That has happened with Tripura, for example, a neighboring state. Now, if the hill people think that this will end with the Meiteis being overnumbered, they are wrong, because the protection they have can simply be overridden by a central fiat of the parliament, for example, right? So I think both the people, hill people and the plains people in the valley people in Manipur have to be united on certain issues and have to sort out their issues within themselves. There is no place for a third party, especially a third party which happens to be taking over resources all over India under some context or another, for the cause of development or globalization, whatever you call it.
Yeah. Gorgo? Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
That's exactly where I think we should allow both the valley and the hills to decide how they contain this influx. The valley cannot decide how the hills contain this influx. And I think this is exactly where I think there needs to be the voice of the tribals needs to be heard. And for this, I think it's high time that we have separate administration to decide for ourselves and not have the valley decide everything for us.
Meena, go ahead.
I think right now the inner line permit is there in the states of Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Mizoram. And in other parts of India like Kashmir or Himachal Pradesh, a non-indigenous person cannot buy land. Only a native person can buy land. Anyway, for us, we are all human beings in one country, in one globe. I mean, we should do away with all archaic British laws actually, and try to live for once and all as human beings. We're trying to nurture our age-old ties and things like that. Right now, what's happening is the whole issue of the whole concern of what's happening. There are, as we said, there is not just an element of what's happening between the hills or the valley, but in New Delhi, people of the Northeast are uniting together to fight against racism. Because we all are Tibetan Mongoloids, we look same.
That's the
and
point.
Some of the concerns that we have to collectively resist.
The need of the hour is, I think,
and I think that...
So guys, can you all give me a pause for a moment? I hear Bablu. I hope Bablu hears me. Bablu, just can you give me a pause for a moment? I know that Malika wants to get back in, then we'll come back to you.
Well, Beena, I'm actually glad that you discussed the discrimination, because we got several tweets specifically tweeted to you asking for you to elaborate on it. So thank you for doing that. I want to pivot here just a little bit. This is from Vang, who brings up maybe an idea for how to go about uniting these two groups. This is someone who says, in the guise of protecting rights of the people in the plain, they've actually nullified the rights of the hill people. So how to combat that, you have this tweet who says, no development happens in the hills. Valley politicians and bureaucrats usurp all the funds meant for the development of our areas. So Beena, could development in the hills, could politicians focusing on that solve some of the tension?
Yes, as I said, that democracy in Manipur is a democracy purchased by money power. gun power, drug power. This is a tragedy of both hills and valley. Our representatives of both hill and valley have failed us to protect our rights. And today, people like normal citizens are fighting amongst each other for the wrongs done by our government. This is where we must unite.
This is exactly why
it is
the
to
House
remember
of
that
MLAs
mainstream
So
Indians
guess
in
I
Delhi,
promised that
mainstream-
Bablu would be able to jump in the conversation. He's on the phone, so he has a disadvantage. Bablu, go ahead. What did you want to add? Ha, I made space for Bablu, and now I hear no Bablu. Control room, do we have Bablu?
Yes, I do. I'm sorry.
All right, Bablu, go
Difficult to
ahead.
hear, but,
yeah, go ahead. What
yes,
did you want to add?
To my understanding, this is a struggle for survival and identity and the control over resources for both the hills and the valleys. What we need to do is that, unfortunately, we are caught up in this struggle so much to ourselves. We need to be able to get a little broader and empathize with the struggles of the brothers. The hill people should be able to empathize with the brothers of the valley, and the valley should be able to empathize with the hill. And that is the way forward.
See, Bablu, there's not a lot of empathy going on right now. That's not a very pragmatic. That's not a very pragmatic suggestion.
And the way forward is like in our effort to understand each other and find a way out.
The rhetoric of empathy won't work. It's in real politics. I think the situation is quite different, and the divide between the hills and the valley were not created just yesterday. They have the people in the hills have been asking for a separate administration for as long as I can remember, and I think history is a testimony to this. If the idea of Manipur does not survive, I think it is the responsibility, is the fault of the government of Manipur over the last 30, 40 years. That they have failed to include everybody. And in failing to do so, the idea of Manipur perhaps will not survive. That's my suggestion.
Gorga, I'm just curious about Gorga. I'm just curious about how this story is playing out in the rest of India. Are people following this story very closely? Does it have an impact on their lives? If we take us outside of northeast India, how's the rest of India reacting?
I mean, first of all, people of what is the northeastern region under Indian administration is basically considered a zone which comes into news only when people die. Okay, people from that area, when they go to Delhi or Bangalore, mostly Delhi, they are considered subhumans. Their males are considered subhumans. Their women are considered,
hold on a minute.
easy, for example. So that's
a really extreme thing to say. How do you know that the northeasterners are considered to be subhumans? Why is that?
Of course, it is the daily experience of northeasterners all over in India.
Yeah.
Of course, it is changing in certain sectors.
Bina, just hold tight for a moment, because I can hear one guest at a time. Gorga, finish off this idea of that northeasterners are considered to be subhuman. What does that mean?
They are called Chinese. They are called racial epithets and slurs in every turn. First of all, we have to also remember, why are they in Delhi? Because there are no local resources in Manipur. No serious good educational institutions have been set up. If you go to a shop in Imphal, the capital of Manipur, most of the things you can buy off the store are made in outside of Manipur. So what do you consider a place like this? And what you have, mostly what is there of Indian origin are materials which people can buy, and army people who are there. I mean, this is not a normal place. And I think the rest of India has to wake up to this reality that they are a part and parcel of what is being done in Manipur. They cannot absolve themselves from this. It is being done in their name, under the name of their constitution, under the name of their representative government.
I think this is a really good point for me to actually say that as a team, we reached out to the government of India. We also reached out to the authorities in Manipur. We didn't get any response, but we felt it was important to actually say that as we were having this conversation. Let me head back to Malika. Malika, what do you have?
Well, so many different threads to this, but this person on Twitter really summed it up in his 140 characters. David writes in, what it boils down to is every group, every ethnicity just trying to protect itself.
All right. Thank you, Bina and Goland and Gorga and Bablu, for helping us through this incredibly intense and emotional and also violent story in the northeastern part of India, and for introducing us to the chaos and the turmoil that is in Manipur. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts, your insights in this episode of The Stream. Until the next time, we'll see you online.